Hey y'all, welcome back to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. Thanks for joining us here. You know that we appreciate you joining us. We're on day 6 of raising our Cornish rock cross meat chickens, and this was a flock of just over 300 little birds, and so they're 6 days old, and we're starting out looking right in the brooder because I wanted to be able to show you how the birds interact with the supplemental heat source. And this is really a perfect example of how we see the birds interact with it. So keeping in mind that birds that are in their first week of life, chickens that are in their first week of life, basically want to feel like it's about 95 degrees around them. So that's a reference point. That doesn't necessarily mean we have to monitor that with a thermometer around the clock, but it does mean that if we're aware of what the temperature is and it's not right around 95 degrees, we need to do something to adjust it and give the chickens access to something that will make it closer to that temperature reference point. So what we have going on here is that it's mid-morning during the end of August in rural Southeast Ohio, USA, and our temperature right now, outdoor temperature right now, and this matches it pretty closely, yep, is about 73, 74 degrees. So with our barn being a traditional barn structure, the temperature inside our barn basically matches the outdoor temperature. So knowing that our reference point is our birds probably want to be about 95 degrees, and knowing that it's about 74 degrees, we know that good management practice is to provide supplemental heat for them. We do that in the form of heat lamps. Now, about 4 hours ago when I was in here, the temperature outdoors was about 10 degrees cooler than it is now. At that time, the birds were in more of a filled-in solid layer under these heat lamps. So there were more birds of the flock using the heat lamps at that time because it was cooler, and they huddled together to utilize their own body heat as a group more, and they were utilizing the heat lamps. So there's 5 heat lamps total, 3 here and 2 here. And as the day goes on, it's supposed to get up to about 90. So probably what will end up happening is that heat lamp there and the center one here, we'll probably leave those 2 on, and we'll end up with the rest of these off, because as it warms up, the birds will warm up and more of them will move out to the perimeters like we're seeing in those places in here. Okay, so that's what we've got going on with that. But this is a great example of how you have that central beam of heated light coming down from the heat lamp, and the birds more or less form a bit of a circle around it. And as the birds get older, they tend to make that look like an even more organized circle. But we're basically seeing that under all of the heat lamps. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to show you. Another thing I want to show you is over here at this heat lamp. And I don't really know how well you'll be able to see it because the birdie is actually laying down. And we're going to try to do this in not a crude way, but a tactful way. But we've got a bird laying down here. I'll see if I can zoom in. So on this bird's rump, on its bottom end, the one that's furthest from us, that just kind of, we can see its eye there. It's on its back end, there's a discoloration. So what I have going on there is, I believe probably in day 5 broilers, I mentioned the possibility of a condition called pasty bottom. In one of our broiler videos here, I've mentioned the possibility of a condition called pasty bottom. And pasty bottom happens when manure from the bird using the bathroom clumps up on the bird's rump and gets stuck there. And so it can be a very bad condition, and we need to sometimes help clean that off of the bird if we see that developing. And it typically happens when they've had temperature stress, especially if they got too cold in their first few days. It also can happen if they get food into their system before water gets into their system and they have difficulty digesting it, and they're not well hydrated at the time that they start eating. But I'll tell you what's happened here if you remember, we're not going to get too much of the color. And well, yeah, you can see it there. If you remember, in day 5 broilers, we did show you the water was a little yellow. And we had done a short also on putting the vitamin and electrolyte supplement into the water. And I had mentioned in day 5 broilers that we're going to use about 3 or 4 days worth. Well, it'll take us 3 or 4 days to use a single packet of this vitamin and electrolyte booster. And I mentioned we're going to use the duration of that packet and then cease using it and return to regular water. And I mentioned it can have the potential to make their manure runnier and looser. And that's what's happened. So in this flock of just over 300 birds, we've literally only had one develop a little bit of loose runny manure that stuck to its bottom and mimicked pasty bottom condition. And so actually what you're seeing there now, I know it's hard to tell it, but what we're seeing there now is it had been runny and loose, it stuck to the bird's rump, and it actually has been pulled off either through just the bird moving around or friction against the bedding material, and it took the downy feathering fur with it. I guess it's not fur, it is feathers, but it's real downy and fluffy. It took the downy fluff off with it, and so the bird's rump is sort of irritated and reddened, but that is going to all heal. And so we would actually do kind of more insult to injury by handling that at this point. So we're going to let it recover naturally. So also want to show you, since we talked about the fluff and the feathers and I tried to find my words, check out the bird's wing. It's like white mature feathers. That will replace the fluffy down on all the birds all over their bodies. And they get that maturing wing or maturing feather on their wing tip and actually on their tail tip back there too. And you can kind of see that happening. So we start to see that milestone here in the first week, and they'll just gradually feather in more and more as they grow. So that's what's going on with the birds. I do have some bad news to share about our flock. I'm sorry to say that, hey, it's Melissa. Thank you for watching our videos. Thank you. And thank you for joining us to see the progress of this flock. It's always exciting to work with the baby birds and see them grow. We do have some bad news on this flock. We did lose one bird. If y'all watched so far, we'll probably lose more is the reality. But if y'all watched day 5 broilers, and if you go back to about timestamp 4 minutes, 32 seconds, I think, I actually zoomed in on a birdie that was standing on the wood riser right in front of a watering dispenser. And I think it was a red tray maybe, but whatever color the tray was, I had said, oh, that birdie is standing there and its head is dropping down and it looks like it's falling asleep, like it's ready to take a nap. Well, after the video, I identified that bird actually as a runt. So we had one runt in the flock. And just for information purposes, we've learned that sometimes when you have runts, that can be from conditions for that particular individual bird in the hatching. And so if it being a runt leads to it not being able to survive like the first week or two, you don't want to get discouraged about yourself as a chicken keeper and a flock manager. This example is just to point out to all of us that sometimes there are things that cause birds to not make it that are beyond our control, that happened before we were involved in managing the flock and that we can't do anything about. But we did lose one bird. I'm not going to show you the dead bird because we identified it after that video of day 5 broilers, and we were keeping an eye on it, and we knew that it probably wouldn't make it through the night, and it didn't, and it ended up being pretty smashed by the other birds too. Smashed as in literally they smushed it, you know, being under the heat lamps and stuff. But it's always discouraging. It discourages us to know one is dying or to lose a bird, but there was nothing we could do about it. So I'll end up just burying that bird. It's a teeny tiny little bird, but the flock number is officially 304 now. We are going to look at our production board. I don't think there's anything new. So just a quick look. We're kind of tracking different things over here. We're going to run out of recording time. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate all of you being here, and we'll just finish up looking in the pen at the chicks. Thanks for joining us. please come back and join us on day 7, taking a look at all our broilers.